If you are a leader who is really ready to level up your skills, take them up to an Olympic-sized level, then you're going to get a lot out of today's episode on the Meeting Leadership Podcast. That's because our guest is Chelsey Reschke, an explosive entrepreneur and corporate leader who's going to give you all her best suggestions today.
Are you a professional who wants to become a more effective leader? Then get ready for practical tips from the coach with the experience and inspiration to help you succeed in any leadership situation. You're listening to the Meeting Leadership Podcast with Gordon Shepherd.
Welcome to another episode of the Meeting Leadership Podcast. My name is Gordon Shepherd. I want to say thank you for being here. Thank you for coming along for the ride where you listen to this show to get your leadership skills to grow. You want to learn how to run effective meetings, and you know that those things go hand in hand. You can't be a leader without being able to run a meeting, and you can't run a great meeting without being a great leader. It is really good to have you here. And I'm also proud to say that the sponsor of today's episode is the Meeting Leadership Academy. Now, if you are a leader who wants to up their game when it comes to running a great meeting, you want to take your team up to the next level, then there you're going to find all of the online and live training options that you need to really do that. And if you want to learn more, just visit meetingleadershipinc.com/academy. And if you are a leader who is ready to grow even more, you're going to get a lot out of today's show. That's because the title of today's show is How to Level Up Your Leadership Skills, and we have a guest. Her name is Chelsey Reschke. And let me take a moment to read a little bit out of Chelsey's bio. It says this: from toughing out sub-zero Canadian winters and blistering Australian summers to leading major business pursuits, Chelsey embraces her work fearlessly and wholeheartedly. And the fact is, Chelsey is a woman who is making it to the highest levels in the oil and gas industry. And on today's episode, you're going to hear exactly why and how she did that. And as you listen, you may want to get out a pen and paper to take notes. There are just so many valuable things that Chelsey brings forward, including the idea of being able to take your meetings right to that subtle level where you're actually considering things like the lighting as a way to actually improve creativity. She has got so many different things going on when it comes to building great teams, addressing large groups of people. You're just going to want to write everything down. And with that in mind, I'm not going to hold you back any longer. Here's the great interview with Chelsey. Chelsey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Gordon. Nice to see you again.
It is so good to have you on this show because there are so many wonderful things from your background on through entrepreneurship into the high-level corporate world that you're going to bring to this interview. But there's a lot of people that haven't met you. And if you had to introduce yourself, what would you say?
My name is Chelsey. I'm a passionate Canadian energy advocate, an entrepreneur turned corporate business developer, and trying to marry those two worlds together. And on the side, I run a project called the 6040rule.com.
Well, I'm going to want to be able to break all of this down. And I know when we met, in terms of getting ready for this interview, you've got this really interesting arc in terms of your own leadership development. Take me back to kind of the beginning of your career, I'm going to say in the energy area. Describe a few of those things and your leadership sort of beginnings, and then maybe kind of get us through to this time now. But what was happening in the beginning when you first got started in the industry, which maybe doesn't have a lot of women in it? Is that fair?
It is pretty fair. I fell into the world of pipeline construction at a pretty young age and founded a business within the first couple of years of being there. It was definitely a story of being in a non-traditional work environment for women, although I really have to say that a lot of my success was tied to the fact that I had such a tremendous amount of male allies and really enjoyed my time in the field for about 5 years. And then moved up into the world of entrepreneurship and joined another company who wanted to get some technology off the ground related to construction. And we were very successful in that realm. And it led me to a job at Stantec doing business development for their oil and gas team.
So we can hear you've had your own ventures, you've worked for folks, and now you're working for obviously a multinational in terms of Stantec, in terms of the work that they do. Take me back to, you said you were in the field Anybody
Yeah.
going into the field in pipelines has got some early stories. I mean, this is not all, you're making it sound like elegant and simple. This is not that. What were your early days like, sort of being out there? Were we talking like field shacks and in the mud and this kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. Getting dropped off by a helicopter in the middle of nowhere and getting picked up again 8 hours later. No, it was wild. It was absolutely the frozen tundra all the way to the extremes of the middle of the desert in Australia. So it was varied in that capacity. It ruined me for being back in Edmonton and being in the cold. But essentially, it was a lot of working with a construction company, doing inspections on pipelines. And with that, having to be very decisive, having to work with a very large array of people, and ultimately having to break some of the molds that were in place. And I think a lot of that really led to me understanding the world of energy a lot better and making some extremely good allies along the way, not without its challenges, like you said.
What do you mean when you say breaking molds?
Well, my first day on the job, I think we've talked about this, was very much, I think you're lost. I think you're in the wrong room. And folks would try and usher me to a different trailer because they didn't think that I had found my way to the right meeting, although I was actually there to be their leader.
And this is by title, right? They looked at you and they thought you were something else. What did they think you were?
Usually more in the administrative aspects of the project, not necessarily in the decision making and having a team.
You walk into the room and they've said, we think you should be somewhere else. Did you run away screaming at that point? There's a real moment there for any leader, coming into that first team moment. What was it like there for you? Like, you didn't, obviously, but what happened for you that kind of gave you the confidence to continue?
This is a unique situation because projects are usually only a couple months. So this first day on the job happens every 6 months to a year, let's call it. So I have a lot of different variations of this. It started off with me being totally red-faced and very, very insecure. And I think that was a huge thing to overcome because in the early days, I didn't have as much of a voice. But slowly over time, I started to realize that I was very prepared. I came with a lot of repertoire. I came with a lot of knowledge. And eventually that confidence grew to the point where I was extremely good at laughing it off. I have a great sense of humor that I've applied to these situations. And it usually has led to those same folks who really didn't give me enough credit being really close friends and allies that I still keep in touch with from all over the world. So I think there's a sense of needing to have a very foundational approach and forgiveness in the sense that this is an evolution that's taking place in the industry. It's not an overnight sort of event where all of a sudden everyone recognizes each other, has just as much capacity. So if I had kind of gotten defensive or if I had gotten a lack of relationship built from that point forward, it would have led to definitely a much worse outcome. However, like I said, you laugh it off, you start to work to find common ground. And essentially, you assert yourself as their leader and show them why you're there, like provide them the evidence in your actions.
You can hear the confidence in your tone of voice looking back. And thank you so much for painting a picture of showing up in a job shack somewhere, when you're walking into this room full of people and they don't think you're the right person to be there, but you overcame that and you started to work through that. There's a leveling up then in your leadership that you described. There's this arc, this journey. I heard well prepared. You knew your material. And then you also started to gain the self-awareness to know when to sort of apply, I'm going to say, laughter in the right moment and build these relationships. How would you describe yourself at your leadership moment now? At what period of time is this over? Is this 10 or 15 years?
Yeah, it's about 10 years.
So that's pretty short. I mean, to rise in a sense through the energy industry for any leader. I've heard this in the construction industry as well, where folks are in there almost in their teens in a sense, and they've sort of racked up as much experience as they need to be like superintendents of large high-rise constructions. And again, you can hear the levels that you're getting to for the projects that you're working on. How would you describe your leadership these days, kind of, again, when you walk in for the first time to a room?
Well, I think that because I was very fortunate to have such an array of interactions with all kinds of different people, I am very much, I would say, a chameleon in the sense of my style. So I could go in a single day from speaking to 150 of our field staff that are about to go out into the frozen winters to do pretty dangerous construction work to being able to completely change my tone and style and present to a CEO. So I think it's just like you nailed it. That sense of self-awareness has been one of my biggest strengths and one of my biggest developmental aspects. And it didn't come all organically. I did hire a coach in about year 6 of my career that I personally paid for out of pocket as an investment to myself. And she worked a lot with me on how to have difficult conversations, how to challenge people that aren't used to maybe being challenged by a woman. I hate to say that. It's not all about gender, but it is true. It is my experience. I think that both the lessons over time, the self-awareness, and the investment in a proper resource external to these companies and my own experience was really foundational. It was great working with Barbara. She's out of Houston.
Wow, that's fantastic that you went and you were proactive. So many leaders get isolated. They get stuck. They get stuck in titles. I can tell you, I meet them over and over again. You've got these titles and they don't know where to turn, but you had a proactive step to say, pay out of pocket, just for fun, not even describing the amount of money that you spent on that kind of leadership coaching. What would you say your return on investment is for that investment of dollars?
Oh, well, this is an easy one because it was actually that same coach, Barbara, who encouraged me also to get my MBA. She encouraged me to apply for some awards that led to an elevation of my own personal capital and brand. The MBA itself was at her recommendation. I went to the exact school she told me to. And I think the investment paid for itself in the next year, honestly. So the return on investment is easily 1,000 to 1 in terms of what I paid for the coach.
I can't get enough of this, 1,000 to 1. So when I hear people, some people are funny enough, they'll get price sensitive in that moment. And if they're honestly, ready to invest, and I would say this for individuals, and I heard you say, pay it out of my own pocket. It doesn't matter to me where those resources come from. I can tell you for me, when I help companies learn about the importance of meetings, essentially it's the importance of communication, but this is this idea of when you actually let people have the time that they need to invest in their own development, and you actually show them the dollars. And the dollars, the funny thing about these amounts, usually they're in the, I'm going to say, low thousands, kind of thousands, but those people can, for productivity, just shoot through the roof in terms of the return that they can bring back once they gain those skills.
Well, Gord, you're in the business of capacity building, and the human experience and the immense amount of potential that our lives have, especially in North America. We are so very lucky to be in a country like this. You nailed it. I think it's really about making sure that you're leveling up continually. And so many people that I've worked with stumble upon, I don't want to pay for this $2,000 course, even though I know in the first week of this job that I'm going to get, I get paid $1,000 a day. It doesn't make any sense that the immediate expectation is that the company will continue to help you level up. Corporations do the best they can. Business owners do the best they can. But it's like leading a horse to water. You can't make a horse drink. You have to come and be really a part of that overall solution and have a really clear idea in your mind where you want your life to take you eventually through those steps.
Well, in terms of percentage, you'd be in that upper sort of single-digit % of self-aware type of leaders. I mean, folks can, I'm hoping, hear this and more people can go to the trough to drink because they really need to. So many organizations could just use this. A lot of my work, for example, it's one thing to do a long program change, like change management programs, for example, where you tackle, all kinds of teams and this kind of thing, and you move them through a multi-year process. I find those things often aren't sticky. It's very difficult to get culture change at scale. But when I hear individuals where they can tackle it with themselves and their immediate teams, when they can put it into hours instead of years and get at least some momentum into the situation. And then, like you're saying, if you have those options to go MBA, funny enough, I was 42. I went back. I did an MBA at that age and had a transformational experience to bring me to the work I'm at now. But I can't get enough of the critical thinking package that came from that. So some people might say, wow, that cost it wasn't expensive. It was like $24,000. But again, I can't tell you the impact that I've had from being able to be in the room then in any given situation with those tools in my tool belt to help leaders move forward. And I know we could talk on and on about this specific area in self-awareness. One of the other pieces that we'd like to do with the guests that come on the show is actually get some of your best I'm going to say, meeting leadership tips. So these days when you are working with, someone in your company, or you're encouraging somebody, or you can bring forward, I love this chameleon piece because it sounds like you're very adaptable. What other kind of tips practically would you pass forward to people to help them to improve their meetings?
I think that I have a unique perspective because I came from a small and medium-sized enterprise and have just recently in the last half a year stepped into a 22,000 person organization. So there's very different cultures, and I'm learning both have their advantages. So as it comes to meetings, there is definitely overall in all sizes of businesses a lack of a sense of purpose around why are we meeting, even down to having some notes in the actual invite saying the purpose of this meeting is to determine whether or not we are going to do this or that. Two options. Maybe that's not always the ease of having more complex problems to tackle, but I think that there is a purpose of every meeting, whether it's just to check in and have a progress update, or to actually make a decision that is going to be used for some other decision. It's cascading. I think that we need to be focusing on purpose a lot more in setting the tone for these meetings, especially if you're the organizer. That's your duty.
I could not agree more. And I like this phrasing that you've got. And it's funny, I work with all kinds of people, again, across age levels and experience levels, literally saying, write these words down on your agenda. The purpose of this meeting is. Just that, if they took that away from this conversation right now, I'm going to say most people don't even do that. The next piece of my work is I actually think that every meeting that you're in should be connected to your strategic plan. So I actually get people to write the strategic objectives from the strat plan onto their agenda for the right meeting. And then
I like that.
They absolutely,
I like that a lot.
right? So what we can do is you could do it with the Stantec, you could do it with your own strat plan, whatever that is. That's the piece that gets me really excited, because so often those strategic plans sit on the shelf, right? Consultants get paid a lot of money. There's about 5 folks at the top of the food chain that get all excited about it and say they did a 360. The communication, and I worked for a 20,000 plus person organization as well. And those strat plans worked well on high, but for a multi-billion-dollar organization, how do you get that sort of manager that I was, kind of 8 layers down with their little team, working together to really make it their own? And we had to do that sort of in a clunky way. So now my inspiration is to go out and say, know why you're meeting, but pull the language from the strat plan into the situation. And I think I'll take away from what you just said, which is just that simple wording. The purpose of this meeting is, and if they can get that on their agendas, it'll make a big, big difference. In terms of facilitation, what do you sort of suggest for folks to do as well in your own experience?
We are a pretty docile society that sits all day. I think you need to also consider the environment. So the environment being the corporate environment that you're working in, try to vary it, try to have shorter meetings that have the clear sense of purpose standing. I think a lot of the time we are already at our desks for way too long. Having a standing meeting, you would not believe how quick people are to get to the point when they are standing. I don't know what it is psychologically, but as soon as you can give people the opportunity to lean on a boardroom table or recline in a chair, it just changes the energy entirely. So some things that we're starting to experiment with is using the various unique spaces that we have within Stantec that are more organic, meeting pods, open areas, even some seating that we have that's a little bit more like a classroom to do a workshop so that we have just a change of scenery. And I think it's even down to lighting. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a lot of evidence that shows that having dimly lit and darker lighting in an environment provides creativity. So the outcomes, say you're trying to solve a more complex problem and you're asking for creative brainstorming, consider dimming the lights a little. These are all things that are psychological cues. And if you are going to have the most high performing team, you need to start doing some research like that. It is such a limited amount of hours in a day. So why not pull that extra 10% out by experimenting with some use of color, space, standing, sitting, physical interaction, the types of tools that you're using, especially if you have a shy audience, try and get some written feedback, post-it notes, that sort of thing. There's a list. We could go on forever.
Well, that lighting thing is a breakthrough for myself and the people listening, because what you're talking about is that's Olympic athlete coaching level, right? Like, hey, wait a second.
That's like the,
you know what?
the Michael Phelps where he does the swimming in the pool in the dark.
That's what it is, right? Like, we found out what the lighting Kelvin temperature is. Kelvin, is 3,200 degrees for indoor and 5,400 degrees for outdoor in the sun. We're going to dial it down to 28, 27 or whatever, because that's the optimal creative thing. That is so exciting because, and especially when you think about the environment that you're in, but this is something that people can apply anywhere, obviously. So this, and not get back to, well, this is how we've always done it this way. I can't tell you, again, when I work with teams, it's trying to help them say, don't sit in that same chair in that same way every time. In fact, I often say, get rid of the chairs if you can, because the stand-up thing is being proven over and over again. And thankfully, you're reinforcing even that.
Yeah, I'm definitely trying. I've got a pretty high-performing team as it is right now. So we have recently gone through some additional workshops for capacity building to work on communication within meetings. So the purpose, process, payoff, that sort of idea, those three elements that are stitched into how you start and walk through a response, especially in an interview setting where we're addressing multi-million, if not $100 million opportunities. So we have a really great set of resources that help us apply all of this research and all of this life lesson into a pretty organized package.
Wow. I wish this interview format was like 6 hours long, because I can hear we could keep going. I just need to sort of roll on to the last sort of third of what we like to cover when folks come on the show. And it starts with a very simple question, and it's this: what inspires you?
I am a builder. I love building things. So in life, I'm always at my best and the most inspired, if you want to call it that, when I'm able to see the product of what I am doing form some sort of asset benefit process. So I think that anything that I can do to get my hands on building things, people, or teams, that's when I'm just at my best.
Take me to a moment when you, like, it's just, I mean, quite literally, did you just stand there in, I don't know, burning Australia or the tundra somewhere and look at a piece of pipeline and go, I did that? Like, is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, I've actually physically have some pictures of me with my hand on the pipe, welded, 400 kilometers long. Some of it's in the ditch, some of it's above ground still. But there's just such a sense of awe for how many hands have had to touch that aspect of the job to get it to where it's at. I've been some pretty interesting places, and a few very favorite photos still sit on my walls.
Wow, you can hear the inspiration in what you're doing. Thank goodness you're a builder of not only pipeline energy projects, but teams as well. And it sounds like you're not even halfway through your own leadership development journey. It has been just great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This was great. I'm really glad to talk to you, Gord.
If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
They can email me. It's Chelsey, Chelsey, at the6040rule.com.
You got to spell that out for us.
Oh, it's the 6040rule.com.
Chelsey at the 6040rule.com. Another great opportunity for any leader listening to this show to be in touch with you, to learn from this high integrity, high energy approach. So good to have you here.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Now, I think you'll absolutely have to agree that that was a very valuable interview from a leadership learning perspective, right? This idea of, really being courageous when you encounter your firsts, the first time that you meet new teams, and being able to get over that red face thing and put sort of a procedure in place that you can actually go out, learn, and get the skills that you need to become a stronger, more confident leader. Chelsey has done that in spades. And I also really appreciate that Chelsey keeps those photos nearby. I mean, you can just see her standing beside that pipeline that she helped to build. And that's the kind of reminder that every leader needs now and again to make sure they keep moving forward. And if you want to keep moving forward on your leadership journey, you may want to check out a few other episodes from the Meeting Leadership podcast that were related to the things that Chelsey was talking about today. In episode 38, you'll learn how to make a great first impression in a meeting. And you can get that episode by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/38. And then, because Chelsey mentioned that it's a good idea to bring in professionals as needed to grow your leadership situation, I wanted to let you know about episode 29 on the Meeting Leadership podcast. It's called 7 Tips to Help You Hire a Professional Meeting Facilitator. Now, that can be very valuable at the right time when you are in a situation where you want to really enhance something with your team. And you can get that episode by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/29. And finally, because I shared Chelsey's passion about meeting rooms, I think you should check out episode 52 on the Meeting Leadership Podcast. It's called 13 Practical Questions to Answer Before You Book a Meeting Room. And this is another one of those episodes that'll help you take it up that 10%. And you can get that episode by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/52. And for all of your other meeting leadership needs, check out the Meeting Leadership Academy. There you're going to find some one-on-one training options, some group training options, and some online training options as well that will help you grow your leadership skills and take your meetings up to that Olympic level. And you can learn all about that by going to meetingleadershipinc.com/academy. And for everyone who is already a subscriber, thank you so much. And if you haven't done it, hit the subscribe button. We would really appreciate it. And also, if you get a chance to leave a rating and review for the show, we will definitely respond, and we will definitely take that in as we move into future episodes. And as always, thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time on the Meeting Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the Meeting Leadership Podcast. Be sure to subscribe for more strategies to help you become an outstanding leader. And don't forget to rate and review so we can bring you even more great content. We'll see you next time, right here on the Meeting Leadership Podcast.
I'm on top of the world, now I'm living. And the good just gets better, keeps it giving. Not even close to the end. It's